Hi everyone, my name is Ben, welcome back to my channel. Hope you're doing really well. I'm not doing so well actually today. This is not a delicious tea, but in fact a lemsip because I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. I feel like I'm just getting endless colds this autumn and winter. I don't know if anyone out there is feeling the same, but it seems to be every time I go to the cinema, I come back with a headache, a runny nose, and I'm sneezing. This weekend's culprit was Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Great film, terrible sniffles. If this carries on, I am going to have to consider renaming the channel to Ben Feels Bad. But anyway, we are not here to talk about how ill I'm feeling. We are here to talk about what I read last month. And I had, by my standards, another bumper month. Just to temper your expectations, you might be used to seeing YouTubers be like, I read 20 books last month. I read 6, 4 of which were under 200 pages. And yet I am still proud of myself because that is quite a lot for someone who normally reads like 3 or 4. I read 6 last month, 6 this month. Who knows where this is going? I am on track for my most ever read books in 1 year. Last year was my highest total and it was 52, which was 1 a week, and I was very happy with that. This year, I've already surpassed that and it's looking like I might breach 60. So that's very exciting. I'm going to talk through these books in the order that I read them. So first up is my spooky season read that I was reading over Halloween and finished right at the start of November. And this is The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana Enriquez. She's an Argentinian author, so this is translated from the original Spanish by Megan McDowell. This is a collection of horror short stories, wide on the spectrum of gruesomeness. So some are out and out vicious, others just are a bit of a unsettling mood. I really enjoyed this. It was perfect for the time of the year that I was reading them. I really enjoyed how the language was very precise and spare and every word was put to good use. There are 12 stories in here and it's quite a slim volume, and they did make me feel unsettled and uncomfortable. So if you enjoy that, then you'll probably get a lot out of this book. On the flip side, I would say the voices between the stories weren't super distinct to me, but that's not always a big deal. I wouldn't say I remembered all of these stories, but some of them really have stuck in my memory. And in particular, I loved the ones that seemed to be using horror as a way to make a politically charged or feminist or sociological point about Argentina. I don't know how true some of the things insinuated by some of these stories are. There's quite a few about children and how children seem to go missing or be treated or abused in urban environments. I imagine there is a political point in there. And I'd be really interested to read a bit more and find out a bit more about that. So if you're after a horrorful read, then I'd recommend giving this a go. The next book I read was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and I have the absolutely stunning hardback copy here. My husband is currently reading the paperback version of this, and the cover just sucks. Like, I don't know why they didn't use this and just make it paperback size. Like, that's beautiful. This book is very, very, very hard to talk about without spoiling. And if you have read it, you'll know it's great. If you haven't read it, I actually would recommend going in completely blind. I wouldn't even read the blurb. So I'm going to try and talk about this in the most vague terms possible. This is a book about a character called Ryland, and even knowing his name is too much information, to be honest. Not because it spoils anything about the plot, but because at the start of this book, he wakes up and he doesn't know who he is, he doesn't know where he is, and he doesn't know how he got there. He is clearly someone who has some scientific background, and so he uses scientific thinking and the knowledge that he's got sort of stored away in the back of his memory to work through a series of problems in a really logical way. It's a very satisfying thing about Andy Weir's writing. If you read The Martian, you'll be right at home reading this. It's got the same sort of problem, explore solutions, find the right one, move on to the next problem. And it's really satisfying just to see an expert solve a problem. I don't want to say anything about what those problems are or what brought him to this starting point, but the book alternates between the present when he's woken up and the past as he sort of remembers what happened to him and how he ended up where he did. I normally don't like the literary device of someone conveniently not remembering anything and then very conveniently remembering stuff just at the right time. I find it quite a lazy way of creating tension in a story, and I expect a bit more from authors. But in this book, it's actually done really well. There's a very satisfying reason for telling the story like that. And I came away just absolutely loving this book. I did give this book 5 stars, but before I started it, actually, I looked back at The Martian and what I'd given that, and I gave it 3 stars, and I couldn't for the life of me remember why, because I have really fond memories of reading that and found it similarly satisfying to read. But once I was deep into this, I remembered why it sort of rubbed me up the wrong way. And it's because when Andy Weir's protagonists are problem solving, it's really enjoyable to read when they're doing it in their head and they're talking themselves through like the problem or recording it for some reason that is valid. But when the characters are talking to each other, they have this really annoying way of just doing scientific exposition, and it just feels really unnatural. They'll be like, oh, do you remember what this scientific principle is? And then the other character will say, yes, but then explain the whole thing back to them. And it just doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like how real people talk. It would be like if you went home and your partner was cooking spaghetti bolognese and you said, are you cooking spaghetti bolognese? And then they replied by repeating like the history of spaghetti bolognese and the exact recipe and the steps you need to go through. And I just don't like that. Nevertheless, I gave this 5 stars because it was really bloody good and it made me feel things, and I quite like feeling things. Okay, great. The next 3 books I actually read in quick succession, and they were all gifts from my husband. And I have a whole video about those books, so I'll touch on them briefly here and tell you sort of what I thought at a high level, but I'll also link in the description my video where I read them all and give full reviews. It is a 20-minute video, which I didn't think I would ever produce a 20-minute video, but there apparently I had a lot to say. The first of those books was The Taiga Syndrome. This is by Cristina Rivera Garza, and it's translated by Suzanne Levine and Aviva Kana. This book is about an ex-detective who's hired by a man to go and track down his second wife, who has gone missing. She's run away with another man into the Taiga, which is a snowy forest, basically. It is weird. I really respect this novel, and I've thought about it quite a lot, but I just really didn't enjoy the process of reading it. It's very disorienting. I did not understand what was going on and what was real most of the time, but it's got this really like alluring obsession with translation. So there's a translator that she takes with her on the hunt for this lady. There's a lot about the translation of one sense into another, memory into reality, imagination into description. And it is sentence to sentence quite beautiful, but it veers very close to poetry. And I don't love poetry. I struggle to understand it. You might get a lot out of this, and I think it would really benefit from repeated readings, but I'm not going to run back to it anytime soon, I don't think. Beautiful cover though. Simon Savage actually did point out that all 3 of these books look very lovely together. They've got like a common colour palette, which is always nice, isn't it? Aesthetics matter. The second book from my little gift haul was The Architect's Apprentice by Elif Shafak. This book is set in the 16th century Ottoman Empire, modern day Turkey, and follows a young boy called Jahan who arrives in Istanbul with an elephant in tow and kind of ends up in the fold in the Sultan's palace. And it follows him for pretty much his whole life, which is really great because you get to know characters so well. It's got a really interesting cast of characters based on real historical figures. There's a lot of character building and plot in this book, as well as a bunch of twists and turns. I didn't give this 5 stars despite really enjoying it. There was just a bit towards the end where it kind of lost its way a bit and tried to be a little bit too ta-da, and it didn't need it. But on the whole, really loved it. The final book I was given as a gift was The Swallowed Man by Edward Carey. This is a book that fleshes out part of the Pinocchio story where Geppetto is swallowed by the whale, or the terrible dogfish. It's a very short novel, it's a very quick read, it's a very intriguing account of loneliness, and I enjoyed it, but I found the narrator a little bit irritating. to be totally honest. What I did love was that this was originally commissioned as part of an exhibition in Pinocchio Park, which is a Pinocchio fans' wonderland in Collodi, where the original author of the Pinocchio story in Italian lived. And so the text of this novel is not the only part of that. And what you get in the book form is a bunch of pictures or sketches or drawings or images of the sculptures or items that were in that exhibition. And that's really engaging. It makes you feel like this is sort of a real account that was found of the 2 years that Geppetto spent in the whale. So yeah, it's intriguing. I said this in my other video, but I think it would be a nice companion piece to the Guillermo del Toro adaptation of Pinocchio that's about to come out on Netflix, or I think it's in cinemas now actually. But yeah, I'm tempted to check it out and see if the two go well together. Finally, I read a book called The Assault by Harry Mullash. Harry Mullash is a Danish author. So this was, who is this translated by? It does not say. This was translated from the Dutch by Claire Nicholas White. This book follows a character called Anton Steenwyck, who lives in occupied Holland during the Second World War. And in the dying days of the Second World War, there is an assault, an incident where a Nazi collaborator is murdered right outside his house. What we see then is both the immediate fallout of that murder, but then we follow sort of the echoes and reverberations of that incident throughout the years. I think it goes all the way up to the 1980s, the early 1980s. And we follow Anton through all that time to see the effect it has on his life. And also as he just finds out more about what happened. Like it's not a detective novel or a thriller, or like you're not trying to find out who done it. But he does sort of find out more about what happened and why, and the implications for other people around him. I found this book just so powerful and moving, particularly in the first part in 1945, when the assault first happens. The level of terror and fear and uncertainty that I felt, I can't really think of many books that have made me feel like that. Harry Mullash's ability to build tension is just so incredibly impressive. Interestingly, I'd never heard of this book before, but someone at my book club recommended it as one they thought I would like, and they were very right. But I'm also really surprised that I just hadn't heard of this before. I feel like it should be better known and more people should read it. So if you're into a bit of World War II fiction, if you are really interested in deep character studies and complex overlapping motivations and narratives, then I'd really encourage you to read this. It's not a very long book. I don't know how easily available it is. I ordered it from eBay, but I loved it, and I think you should read it. I've just remembered that there is a quote from the prologue that I wanted to read to you, because I think it is a really lovely metaphor for the complexity of the rest of the book. In this scene, Anton is sitting down by the canal just outside his house, and he is watching the boats pass by. The motorboats were different. Pitching their prows would tear the water into a V shape that spread until it reached both sides of the canal. There the water would suddenly begin to lap up and down, even though the boat was already far away. Then the waves bounced back and formed an inverted V, which interfered with the original V, reached the opposite shore transformed, and bounced back again, until all across the water a complicated braiding of ripples developed, which went on changing for several minutes, then finally smoothed out. Each time Anton tried to figure out exactly how this happened, but each time the pattern became so complex that he could no longer follow it. And that is pretty much what he does for the rest of the book following the assault, trying to unpick the meaning and the implications for him and all of the characters around him, leading these complex interior lives, also impacted by the same event. Thought that was a nice little taster. So there it is, that's everything I read in November. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and if you're not subscribed, now's a really good time to hit that subscribe button. So until next time, toodles!